welcome to the Big Seance podcast. I'm Patrick Keller of BigSeance.com, and this is a place for an open discussion on all things paranormal, but specifically topics like ghosts and hauntings, paranormal research, spirit communication, psychics and mediums, and life after death. So basically, anything that pops up in my paranormal world. The candles are already lit, so you might as well come on in and join the seance.
This is, I think, the 8th or 9th time today's guest has been on the show. Isn't that crazy? She's been stopping by since 2016 and has been a great friend of the show and is a supporter of all things Big Seance. And I'm talking about Dena DeCastro. Dena is an astrologer and author in Portland, Oregon. She has been a counseling astrologer for over 20 years and has been teaching astrology since the mid-2000s. She received her astrological training through Stephen Forrest's apprenticeship program and holds 2 master's degrees. Her articles have been featured in the Mountain Astrologer magazine, and she has appeared on many podcasts and local radio shows over the years. She also hosted the Serious Astrology podcast from 2007 to 2014. I believe that's how I found you. I think it is. One of the first astrology podcasts. In 2021, Dena and fellow astrologer Katie Sloan created the Let's Get Real Astrology podcast, which they co-host. She currently provides individual readings as well as mentorship for those who want to learn astrology. Her new book, Foundations of Astrology, a workbook for beginners, is available on Amazon and via her website at DenaDeCastro.com. Welcome, Dena. Welcome back.
Thank you, Patrick. It's so great to be back.
Y'all, when I have Dena on, it's different because she put so much effort and energy into being on this show, and she's so prepared that it's kind of, I told her it was kind of like, okay, I'm ready for the masterclass today. So, typically I have a lot of notes and everything in front of me, and she shared with me her notes. And so I'm like, okay, cool. I just get to sit back and think of nerdy questions every now and then and just let this roll.
Yeah.
Yeah. So the last time you were here, I pushed you out of your comfort zone, and do you remember that? You went live with me on social media.
That's right.
For the first time, and that was a big and brave leap for you. So have you done any live appearances since then, or am I the only one that forced trauma on you?
You were the only one that forced trauma on me. I have not done it since then. Not that it was a bad experience at all. It was, in fact, I hardly even thought about it being live at the time. So that should have been a lesson to me. Like, it's really not that big of a deal. But for some reason, doing it myself or, pushing myself to do it is a lot different than having you invite me and kind of take the reins and guide me through it. So no, I haven't done it.
Yeah, my preference is to not go live. Just every now and then I'm like, especially if it's something that I know we need some listener engagement.
Yeah.
Or some questions or something like that. And every now and then it's just fun to do. But yeah, my preference is definitely to be in my little comfort zone where I can edit things and just sit here and chat about something without recording it for a while. Live is so much different.
Yeah, it is a different feeling. And there is that big difference of knowing that you can edit stuff out. That's huge.
It's like, having to get up and dressed formally for a dinner or a party or something. It's like, sometimes that's a lot of stuff that's not worth it.
Yep. Totally agree. Yep.
Anyway, that was January of last year, and you were giving us a forecast for 2022. And so I've already kind of purged 2022 out the window, but did things go as expected? Do you remember anything from that forecast?
Yeah, I mean, I heard back from people, and that's really the only way I know, because I don't necessarily keep track of it in my head as well as you might think. So people will report back to me that, oh, you said this on that podcast and this is happening, and or you said this in my reading and this is happening. And so, I mean, just to be clear, like, I'm not a predictive fortune telling astrologer, so it wasn't like I made predictions for 2022, but we talked about themes that were going to come up.
Right.
And I believe that, yeah, there were definitely, those were the themes presenting themselves for sure.
I guess it would be impossible. You would, if you were constantly tracking everything from a forecast, that's all you would do. You'd just walk around all day long.
No, and I'm not really that interested in that part of it of like, quote, did I get it right? Because that is a more predictive mindset, which is not, as you know, not what I'm about. So that would just consume a part of my brain that I don't really want to give over to that.
Yeah. But I totally get it. I often need that reminder that it's not a predictive thing.
Yeah.
And, I hear you say that every time and I'm like, damn it, I'm always thinking that it's a predictive thing.
Well, it's pretty common, Patrick. It's like, it is the perception of astrology that's out there. And I'm just constantly, persistently pushing back on that and, saying there's another way. Not the the predictive types of astrology are not bad or wrong. And people are free to do that. And there are people out there doing that. It's just not what I do. And it's a philosophical difference that I have with that type of astrology that I want to present as another, alternative way of looking at it.
Well, today we're going to talk about eclipses, which I don't think we've spent a whole episode talking about that before, which is exciting. And I'm curious because when I think of eclipses, I will never not think about an old, totally dark and unique Disney film that they never made anything like it again. In 1980 called Watcher in the Woods. Have you seen Watcher in the Woods?
Yes. I saw it when it first came out, I think. I was about 10.
It starred Bette Davis, which makes me laugh that in my lifetime, a movie came out with Bette Davis.
Yes, I know. She was pretty old then.
Yeah. I mean, I remember being fascinated by it, but also like traumatized by it.
It was a little too dark for 10-year-olds. I don't know.
Yeah. And I mean, but it was fascinating. I remember having dreams about it and watching it several times, but it involves a couple of eclipses and like some seance type stuff during the eclipses. And anyway, if y'all have not seen Watcher in the Woods, it is... It's different. It's Disney. I can't believe it's Disney, but it's I guess they were in an experimental phase.
Yeah, they were trying to go dark because if you remember, like in the 70s, that was really the time of, slasher horror came in and all the dark, like movies got really dark in the 70s. Lots of demonic stuff, etc. Right, which we're very familiar with. But yeah, I think that's kind of why they did it. They were at the tail end of it, though.
They wanted a little piece of that. They were like, we see that success. We want some of that.
Right. Typical Disney.
Well, what are we going to talk about today? How are we getting into eclipses?
Let's do it. Yeah, let's talk about eclipses because they are coming up. We have 2 eclipses happening in October. A nice timing for these, eclipses don't happen at the same time every year. They kind of scoot through the months, as I say. So they happen approximately every 6 months, but it varies a little bit, which means they kind of slide through, from it could be one year they're in February and August, and then the next year they're kind of sliding into March and September, right? So this year they're happening. The last set we had was April and May were the last 2 eclipses of this series. And then this month, October, we have one on October 14th and one on October 28th, right before Halloween. That's really, really cool. You can have a really fun eclipse-themed Halloween party that night if you should so wish.
And will it be, I mean, when you say eclipse, you aren't always talking about full eclipse, are you? Just different?
Correct. Yeah. So let's lay that out. Like when we say eclipse, there are two main types. There are solar and lunar. Solar eclipses are when the moon goes in front of the sun from the Earth's perspective, and you can only see it from a very small portion of the Earth. That's why you hear of that phenomenon of people traveling to go see a solar eclipse, right? It has to line up just right from where you are in the Earth to see that as a solar eclipse.
I forgot about that.
Yeah. So you may not see the eclipse, but it is still happening with a solar eclipse. The lunar eclipse, which is much different, is when the sun is literally casting the shadow of the Earth onto the moon. And it creates a kind of red appearance and it darkens the moon. But the moon, it has to be at a full moon when that happens. And conversely, it has to be on a new moon when it's a solar eclipse. So new moon, solar eclipse, full moon, lunar eclipse. With the lunar eclipse, the good news is you can see it wherever it's dark when it's happening. So if it's nighttime where it's happening, when it's happening, you will see it.
I will never forget the solar eclipse that we had. I forget what year around here.
Yeah.
And it was, I mean, the first one, only one I've ever seen. And it was during the school day. And school had just started like that week. So we had only just started with the kids, but it was such a big event. We planned it as staff and took the whole school out to the soccer field. And we passed around like moon cakes and everybody, had the glasses. And
yeah,
I mean, you've never heard 900 kids all of a sudden be crazy in a soccer field to just this moment of awe. And it was really, really cool.
There is something very eerie about solar eclipse when it happens. And if you're there, like there was one in the Pacific Northwest, I think it was about 5-6 years ago here. And it wasn't total, meaning like it didn't go completely dark, but it went mostly dark in the middle of the day. And it is a very, like the birds all go quiet.
Yeah.
Everything gets really quiet. And you're like, what is happening? It is a very witchy, strange feeling. So,
and the temperature drops.
The temperature drops. Yeah. It's like the sunlight's blocked out for a period of time. It's an amazing natural phenomenon. If you ever have a chance to see a solar eclipse, go do that, if it's near to you. That's the astronomy of what's happening. And then there's the astrology of what's happening. And the astrology of what's happening is those eclipses fall into a polarity of signs, the polarity meaning two opposite signs. Over the course of about 2 years, they travel through that polarity. So, for example, we have had eclipses falling in the Taurus Scorpio polarity, those two being opposite signs, over about the past 2 years since the fall of 2021. And then we're going to have the final eclipse of the Taurus Scorpio series on October 28th. And that one is a full moon in Taurus. The sun will be in Scorpio. The moon will be opposite in Taurus. Full moon, lunar eclipse on October 28th. Did I say solar? I meant lunar. So lunar eclipse, yeah. And then at the same time, you start bringing in the new cycle of the next polarity a little bit. They overlap. So we started the Aries Libra polarity in this past spring. In April, we had an Aries solar eclipse. And so now we're going to be doing the Aries Libra, that polarity, those two opposite signs, those eclipses for the next 2 years until 2025. And so there's a meaning that you gather from that astrologically based on, in addition to this, like where are the nodes? And the nodes are the point in the sky where the ecliptic lines up with the sun and the moon. And therefore, the eclipses are always kind of following along with where the transiting nodes are. So I don't want to get too technical there. we could really do a whole masterclass. But
So when I was watching that eclipse with the kids, were we sitting on a node?
yeah, you were sitting on a node. Exactly.
Okay.
Well, just imagine that, because that's a good visual. Let's say you were sitting on a node. So the South Node and wherever it is, and currently the South Node is in Libra. That is where the shadow material is coming up for the collective that we're dealing with, the Libra shadow stuff. And so when the eclipses are lining up in Aries and Libra over these next, now it's going to be another year and a half or so, it's a time of dealing with transmuting and letting go of the shadow stuff regarding that sign. And I will get into what the Libra shadow is. And then trying to move toward and embrace the North Node placement sign, which is Aries in this case. So, I mean, let's just bring it down to earth and talk about this first eclipse that's coming up. We have October 14th. We're going to have a solar eclipse, which means it's a new moon in Libra on that date. And so it is going to bring up an awareness and an opportunity to work through and to kind of set intentions around doing good work with this Libra shadow stuff. And Libra is, it's a sign that's about partnership and connection with people and our relationships. So relationship issues are coming up at this time. And when I say at this time, really the most potent window for an eclipse influence astrologically is about 2 weeks before the actual eclipse and 2 weeks after it. And since the eclipses happen in these pairs that are 2 weeks apart, we have the one on October 14th and then the one on October 28th. That little 2 week period between them is what I like to call the Eclipse Portal, which means it's an intensified period where there's just a time of change, transmuting old energies, new things being brought in, but it's an accelerated growth period. Let's put it that way. And so I have seen this play out in life, that it's not necessarily that it always has to be some big dramatic thing happens during that time, but it is good to notice, for your own self, if you have some of these signs active in your chart, what is cooking in your life, like a couple weeks beforehand to the eclipse, which, we're coming right up on that in October. And what do you want to let go of? And in this case, around old relationship patterns, let's say, that you're ready to let go of. And what new things do you want to invite in your relationship life, your friendships, your closest relationships? We can just make it that simple. And so then on the October 14th new moon eclipse, you can really ground in those intentions about letting go of old relationship patterns and bringing in the new, and for you being specific about what you want that to look like in your life. So does that all make sense so far?
Yeah, like that's something that is self-guided, or is there going to be a natural pull for those things to happen for those people?
I think it's both and. So let's say for all of us, we're collectively influenced by the moon, right? And so we'll all be feeling these themes coming up in our lives, no matter what's going on in your personal chart. So there's that way to look at eclipses. And a kind of good thing about eclipses and lunations in general, new moons and full moons, is that we can all access that and kind of understand it on the astrological level. We don't need to know our birth charts or anything even to access the fact that, okay, Libra themes are going to be up at this next lunation. So I'm going to work on my relationship life. I'm going to bring it to consciousness, bring it to light, right? And we're going to feel the pull, but I think it's a co-creative process. And that's my whole deal with astrology not being predictive for me. It is more of a co-creative tool, right? Just knowing where the energy is flowing and what's up thematically, then I can direct my magical intentions, my ritual,
take advantage of it.
Yes, exactly. And align myself with it, right? And also be aware. I mean, it's nice to know that, for example, if you are having a relationship issue that's coming up right now, let's say you're having a bickering with your partner over a certain thing and it's really driving you nuts, like you can put that in the cauldron and say, okay, actually, this is probably something bringing up something deeper that we need to look at here, right? So notice in these couple weeks before the eclipse on the 14th, what's happening in your relationship life so that you can then take action with that knowledge. Set your intention. You can write it down. Here are my wishes and intentions for my partnership or my friendship or whatever the close relationship may be, as Libra rules partnerships and relationships. Then 2 weeks later, October 28th, we're going to have this second eclipse of the pair, which will be the final of the Taurus Scorpio series. And it's going to be a full moon in Taurus and lunar eclipse. And Taurus is about getting grounded, kind of getting back to practical matters. It's a whole different energy than Libra, right? So we're kind of being asked to wrap up things we've been working on over the past couple of years as the cycle's coming to a close, regarding security, regarding money, regarding feeling safe and kind of grounded and rooted in our lives. And so it's a good time at that lunation on the 28th to release, kind of acknowledge the work that you've been doing on those issues, particularly around money, finances, security over the past 2 years. Acknowledge the progress you've made, and then, release your attachment to things being a certain way that you want them, because that's actually the shadow side of Taurus, can be getting too rigid or stubborn about how I want things to be so that I'm comfortable, right? And it's again playing with both the light and the shadow of the sign that is coming to the surface. So those are general recommendations that anybody can use, no matter what your chart, what your signs are. But then we go a level deeper. If you do know your chart, and if you do know, you have some of these signs active in your chart, you can make it even more specific and fine-tuned to you as to how you're going to use the energy of these eclipses. For example, you're an Aries, right? Yeah. So you're an Aries sun sign.
And I always seem to have you on when there's lots of Aries stuff going on.
I know. I think that does happen, and I'm sure it's not an accident, Patrick.
I'm selfishly looking to get some guidance here.
Yeah, right. Yeah. You planned all this.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, I think it's probably got us winking at you and saying, okay, Patrick,
time to have Dena on.
Time for a little astro guidance. Yeah, so it being that the spring, this past spring, where that first Aries eclipse came in April, kicked it off. I'm going to ask you, I'm going to do a little, you don't have to get too personal if you don't want to, but I'll do a little eclipse research here. So since the spring, or were there any significant changes in the spring regarding vitality, health, creativity, or your sense of self, your kind of your identity that you felt like came in around March, April, May, that period?
Well, I mean, that was leading up to my retirement, which was the biggest thing. Mm-hmm. And it's going to sound horrible, but leading up to my retirement, I was already starting to purge things. Yeah. I was purging physically, a lot of physical things, but also a lot of stress and a lot, like every time something happened last year, it was like, oh, that's the last time I have to keep on a hold of that. Mm-hmm. So I was doing a lot of that. Mm-hmm. But also like gifting things and
giving away.
Here, I thought about this thing that I, always have to worry about. And now you will be in charge of this. So here, I wanted to give you this document or this whatever. So a lot of that stuff. As far as like health and things, I'm not sure.
It didn't really touch that area. So
not in the spring. I can think of something later, but not in the spring.
Yeah, it sets, the eclipses set things into motion. And so in the months after, of course, you could notice things to do with the health and vitality. And I say health and vitality because that's related to the sun, kind of your core energy and, feeling vital. That's one of the things the sun is about. But as you know, with astrology, everything's multi-layered. The planets in our charts are many different things, not just one thing each. But another thing that occurs to me there in your description is that you were letting go of and preparing the way for the new beginning, right? The new chapter of your life to begin. And Aries itself is a sign about new beginnings. It's a sign about like kicking things off and a fresh start and, starting something new. And the energy of the letting go, is really in preparation for that. You have to make, tie up loose ends and make things kind of a nice nest for the new thing to come
I
in.
have to prepare for those things. I don't I would never have done well at, nope, it's the last day, done.
Yeah.
No, like I have to work my way through it and process it and package it up and all of that.
Yeah. Right. So, so you can see that those themes were starting to come in and that now you're in the middle of this time where you're being invited to think about your Ariesness and also oppositely the Libra qualities in you. Because even if you don't have Libra in your chart, we all have Libra in us, but it's your opposite sun sign, opposite of your sun sign for you. So how now, I guess the question on your plate at this upcoming eclipse on the 14th is looking at the balance in your relationships and not just your main relationship with your husband, but also closest friendships and closest family relationships, and looking at how the balance is and how is it supporting the new things that you've kicked off and started, this new chapter of your life. It can be a good time to recalibrate for you and to get your bearings again and fine tune the balance in your relationships right now. That's my little reading.
And that's happening with being retired. And I'm a younger retired person, right? It's a little unusual. And so, there's a lot of pressure and some guilt that's like, okay, I still need to be contributing.
Yeah.
How am I going to contribute to this relationship differently now that I don't have the excuse of stress or work or whatever?
Right. Yeah, it is, because you started a new chapter of your life and then that throws everything else, including your relationships, into a different dynamic with you. And so it's a good time to check in and to say, are you connecting as much with people as you want to, or as too much or too little? It's about fine tuning the balance in all of those closest relationships, right? So that's how you apply it. That's an example that I just did of how you would apply it more specifically, just knowing one piece of your chart, which I'm not even looking at your chart. I'm just knowing that you're an Aries sun. But if I had a chart in front of me, or if anybody out there knows kind of the layout of their chart, you can look at something like the houses, for example, and say, where are those eclipses falling in your houses? The houses rule life areas. Okay. And so if you know your house placements and you know what signs fall in what house, you could see exactly where Aries and Libra fall in your particular setup, or where Taurus and Scorpio fall in your particular setup. And therefore, you know where those eclipses are going to be happening. And so I know in the episode notes, you'll put kind of where are the eclipses and what dates they're happening, right? So people can reference back to that. And if you know your chart a little, that'll be a handy extra thing that you can do to make it more specific. But like for an example, I have, for this set of Taurus Scorpio eclipses that we're wrapping up, I have Taurus is completely in my 12th house and Scorpio is in my 6th house. The 12th house has to do with spiritual connection and spiritual practice. And I just realized this morning that I started a daily meditation practice almost exactly 2 years ago, which is that time frame that the eclipses have been in Taurus Scorpio. And I have been steady about it for the first time in my life. Like, I'm really happy with that and I'm proud of myself. And I'm like, oh, as I'm wrapping up this, Taurus Scorpio time and that 12th house, about spiritual connection being highlighted, I finally did it. Like, I finally for 2 years have meditated almost daily, like 95% of the time, and it's made a huge difference in my life. And I can really see the Taurus, grounded effects of it, how it's helped me to be calmer, how it's helped me to feel more grounded generally, how it's helped me to stay calm during really turbulent events and times. So I can, at the end of this 2-year window coming up on the 28th, my intention will be to solidify that and say, I am just, having gratitude that this has been part of my journey of the past 2 years. And I just really want to kind of sink that in and solidify it now and say, okay, this is going with me now. I'm going to continue this and consciously say thank you, to the powers that be that I've been able to do that. Because meditation is not, I found like it's simplest thing it is work. It's like the simplest thing to tell people to do. In my astrology practice, I tell people all the time, like the one thing you could do that would change your life is that, like, and it's a simple thing, but it's not as simple as it sounds. It's, it's hard to make yourself sit, right?
Yeah.
And just to realize, like, yes, you do have 5 minutes, like, to do this. You don't have to be racing around all the time. So that was a big one for me.
But to stick with it for so long that you see benefits now at the other side, that's cool.
That is cool. And that's a very Taurus idea of sticking with something over time and really, being kind of persistent at it, stubborn about it in a good way. Like, no, I'm going to continue to do this, even though I might not feel like it today. This is what's happening. So yeah, that's been something that I've seen expressing in my life. And I'm now looking at, okay, the Aries Libra eclipses are coming in, and looking at where that's lining up in my chart has a lot to do with creativity. And so that's in my 5th house, and that's been waking up some creative stuff for me. And I'm doing a lot more writing and etc. So I'm working with the energy as I know it's landing in my chart. And so that's really helpful for people to know about. I guess I would want to also just mention looking ahead, to understand that eclipses happen every 6 months-ish, and they're 2 weeks apart. So we have even more eclipses coming up in the spring, and the exact dates, I'm going to have to look here. Yeah, the next Aries solar eclipse is April 8th. And so that will be the next one to look to when the spring comes around. And, some of the activities I suggest for eclipse dates, I mean, I know a lot of people in your audience probably do new or full moon rituals. That's become a pretty common thing, either virtual or in person. I know there's probably going to be any number of lunar and solar eclipse groups or activities coming up. And I think it's a great thing to do, to be with a group. It should be people that you trust, because I do think that there's something to the idea that the veil is thinner around the eclipse periods. And if you're sensitive, you're going to be really permeable to people's energy. And so just choose people you trust and feel comfortable around to do these kinds of group activities with. But that said, it could be a very powerful time to gather and to do intention and ritual. It's like an extra powerful new or full moon that you can do on these eclipse dates.
It makes you wonder what we could accomplish if the whole world focused
yeah, I
on
know,
all of
right?
the general population focused on these things and and outcomes and
oh, I know. Yeah, no, I believe that we could accomplish amazing things if we could all get our minds directed in the same place at the same time, but that's pretty much not going to happen.
Nice idea though.
It's a nice idea. Yeah, it's a nice idea.
In my mind, I just imagined the Coke commercials from the like the 70s and 80s pulling together and
it's the real thing.
Yeah.
But, to that movie that you brought up, The Watcher in the Woods, I think that's why they use the eclipses in there is because it's about the veil being thin.
Yeah.
There is a spooky supernatural quality just to the whole idea of an eclipse. Like something is literally being interrupted of the natural order, and it's a moment of pause. And you can look at that and be kind of spooked out, or you can look at it and say, wow, isn't that the coolest thing ever? And I'm going to ride with that energy and do something productive with it, right?
Except in Watcher in the Woods, as I was researching it actually before we got on today.
Yeah.
I didn't realize that there's things you miss when you're a kid and you just watch things.
Yeah.
But apparently, there's I forget the character name, but a woman just completely disappeared in the middle of this seance experience because they had her blindfolded and I don't know what they were doing. Who knows what they were doing? But then the eclipse happened and she disappeared and they didn't know where she went. And then 20, 30 years later, the adults from this group came back and did the ritual again and blindfolded somebody else. And she came back again. And in the plot, online, it talks about how an accidental thing happened in the stars where she was traded places with some alien force. And then I was just like, what? Missed all of that.
Maybe they didn't explain it that well.
Right.
Yeah. Maybe it was poorly written. That's why we didn't get it.
It did get a lot of mixed reviews. I'll say that.
Mixed reviews on Rotten Tomatoes.
I didn't look on Rotten Tomatoes. That was just Wikipedia.
Okay. I'm going to have to check that out.
Yeah.
Yeah. Eclipses do make their appearances in movies. Then there's that Lady Hawk movie. Remember that there was a thing where, did you ever see Lady Hawk?
I don't think so.
Really? Oh, it's a classic from
we've
the
all got
80s.
Homework today then.
Okay.
Watcher in the Woods and Lady Hawk.
And Lady Hawk, I mean, it was good when I watched it in the 80s, but it didn't age that well because I tried to watch it about 10 years ago. I'm like, the production value is really not that great. Some of the acting.
It's kind of like when I watched Howard the Duck again later. You're like,
yeah.
Wow, what were they on?
Yeah, didn't go so well. But in that movie, the premise is these two characters that's like a tragic love story. One turns into a wolf during the night, the man does, and the woman turns into a hawk during the day. They were cursed. And so the lovers can never be together because one is always an animal. And it's Rutger Hauer. And Michelle Pfeiffer. So you have to appreciate that. But they can only, the way that they figured out the loophole, how to get out of this curse is through an eclipse, because it is the only time that it's both day and night, right? In a solar eclipse in a sense. So then they were both showing up as the human form during that period. It's kind of a beautiful idea.
Yeah. Somebody
should remake it. Remake it with better production values and better music, because the music sucks.
Why am I thinking, I feel like I had, what's the movie Wolf? Is there a movie Wolf?
Yes, there's that with Michelle Pfeiffer, where it's Jack Nicholson as the wolf.
Because that's what I knew, and I hadn't ever seen that, but I had the soundtrack growing up for some reason. I remember that. I wondered if that's what it was.
No, different. You'll appreciate it for what it is, I think.
Okay.
Check it out.
But you said the music sucks?
The music sucks. They tried to do a contemporary music soundtrack on a medieval time movie, and it didn't work.
Wiki. Was there
No, it was like bad 80s rock.
Oh, okay.
Because it's like 1985. So it's like bad 80s rock. That's all I can say. Oh, gosh.
I look forward to that. I'll do that homework.
But that's one movie springs to mind that features an eclipse. So I'm sure there are many more, and maybe some of your audience can come up with them in the parlor.
Yeah, they should let us know. I am always fascinated. I can't believe I'm still finding movies that have seances in them that haven't popped in my, sphere of knowledge. And so every time one pops up, I'm like, oh my gosh, I have to watch this. So it would be interesting. Let us know any of the eclipse movies and shows that we need to check out.
I think it's a fairly powerful device to use in a movie because it's so poetic and, it just confers magic on the whole thing.
It could also, I imagine it could also make you roll your eyes, especially when you have all the knowledge about it.
That's true. That's true. When people, it makes me roll my eyes on social media sometimes when people get too overblown about eclipses when they come around as if, and we've talked about this before, but like when they say, oh, it's a super moon or it's an eclipse, it's like, this isn't the first eclipse that's ever happened. Or, it's not even rare.
Yeah.
And that's what I want to get across to people. It's like, this is not a rare phenomenon. You might get the idea that an eclipse is rare because of what I said earlier about, with the solar eclipse, that you have to be in a certain spot on the Earth for it to line up just right to see a total solar eclipse. However, it's still an eclipse and it's still happening. It's just you might not visually.
And you can get the effects of it no matter where you are.
Exactly. But they are regular. They happen, 2 weeks apart, about every 6 months or so. Sometimes you'll get 3 in a row instead of like every 2 weeks, the pair or the 2 week apart pair, you could get a third one, kind of like a blue moon effect.
Yeah.
With that. That's rare, but it does happen. So yeah, eclipses are not rare. They're a regular cyclic, phenomenon that we can all use and enjoy in our lives.
We had just recently, I forget what people were calling it, because I don't ever know about them beforehand. I'll see on Facebook or Instagram, all of a sudden somebody posts about go outside tonight because da, 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 da. Mm-hmm. And I'll see all these beautiful pictures of like a blood moon or, whatever. And then I'll go out and I don't know if I get out too late or whatever, but I'm like, same moon here. Like
Yeah. Sometimes it's about timing and you got to catch it at just the right time.
Yeah.
So you can look up and see like in your area for the one on the 28th, I believe, let's see, when is the exact time for that? Because if I tell you the time that it is, I'll tell you if we'll be able to see it here in the United States area. So it looks like it's happening in the afternoon here, which means they'll see it more in Europe and that part of the world. So we won't get to see the lunar eclipse.
So don't
here.
forget, just because you don't see people being dramatic about it, don't forget.
Yes.
Just because it didn't make a great, Instagram photo.
Right. There really is still an eclipse happening. You just have to go to France to see it right now.
Get your tickets. Make a plan.
Yep.
So I wanted to mention, and I pulled it up earlier, but you have a great blog post that you have already made about the eclipses of fall 2023.
That's right.
And really, it kind of falls along with what we discussed here. And so people can check the show notes at bigseance.com, but I'll also link this blog post because it's a really great resource. What else do you have going on at the blog?
Yeah, so I have that blog, which also references a previous blog post on the Aries Libra series that was from the spring. And there's a link to that within that post. And I guess a related thing would be Katie and I did a recent podcast episode on the transiting nodes in Aries and Libra. And we expand on a lot of those themes that I talked about with Aries and Libra and what that means for this current eclipse cycle that we're in from now through early 2025. So if you want to listen to something else on it where Katie and I will have our own kind of discussion about it, how we are. It'll be a casual, sometimes expletive strewn discussion about
I love when that happens. Bring it. I love it.
We get sassy.
Y'all get real a lot on there. I love it.
That is the name of the show. Yeah. We're getting real. Let's get real astrology. So yeah, there's that episode, and it's not too far back. It's a recent episode that we did.
So we'll put all those in the show notes, but the blog is, which you could just find at Dena's site, DenaDeCastro.com. Is there anything else you want to talk about?
I think the only thing I would like to add is that if people want to know about their own chart and how to do something like find out where the eclipse is in their own chart, that's really what my workbook can help with, because the workbook will help you to read a natal chart at a basic level. So basically be able to look at that piece of paper with the chart on it and to decipher those symbols. And like you were saying earlier, Patrick, you had found your chart that I did for you in 2016. You're like, it looks like Chinese symbols. So it doesn't look like anything to me.
Yeah, I'm really excited to have it. I love it, except I don't understand it.
Right. And most people don't. And that's totally expected. Like, unless you've studied this stuff a little, you wouldn't understand it. What I've done with the book and what I hope is the way that it works for people is you actually can look at your chart and use the book to help you figure out what those symbols mean. And for example, to know where Aries and Libra are in your chart, specifically what houses those two signs land in. Therefore, then you can say, I know where the eclipses are in my chart now, right? You can figure that out when you figure out how to read your basic natal chart. So it's good for helping people to enter into astrology who are beginners, who just want a foundation. And I kept it really simple and streamlined on purpose, because one of the biggest pieces of feedback I get from my mentorship students is so much of what's out there is very overwhelming. And, it's hard to kind of get your toe in the first place. Like, already the discourse is at a more advanced level in a lot of things. So I really did do basic beginner language, from English to astrology to help people get a toe into the topic.
Just remind, how long have you been doing this astrology stuff?
I have been doing this since 1998 professionally, and that's 25 years.
Yeah.
That's a lot of time. My business really started to grow in the mid 2000s, where I was really regularly seeing clients. And then I started to teach workshops in the late 2000s, mid to late 2000s, and tutoring students kind of in the mid 2000s. I do one-on-one work with people who wanted to learn astrology. So yeah, it's been a minute. And I've been doing the mentorship program the way that I've been doing it now for about 10 years.
Is that the big bulk of what you do now?
No, it's really kind of half and half at this time. It's about half readings and then half mentorship. And I do, regularly the one-on-one readings. Every week I'm doing readings. And then I also have my students that are coming too.
Dena DeCastro, you rock!
Thank you.
For show notes, including links to anything we may have mentioned in this episode, visit bigseance.com. And you can continue the discussion and hang out with a great community of paranerds by joining us in the Big Seance Parlor on Facebook. Want to hear your voice in a future episode? Go to bigseance.com/feedback to learn how. Thank you so much for listening. Unfortunately, it's time to blow the candles out, but we'll see you and light them again next time. Thank you to the following super paranerds who support this show at patreon.com/big seance. Jennifer Scanlon, Michael Henson, Daryl, Anne-Marie Sullivan, Natalie N., Kim Robb, Josiel Lorenzo, and Susan Davey. My supporters at the parlor guest level, who can be found at bigseance.com/parlor guests, are Ali of Hocus Pocus Collector, Anne Rekovich from OzParatech.com, Dena DeCastro of Dena DeCastro Astrology, Janae Michaels from Grey House Tarot and Farm Artifacts, Amy Park Gedicke of amyparkg.com, Lonnie Scott from weirdwebradio.com, Lena and John of Carbon Lilies, Midge Munster from midgemunster.com, Heather N. of dancingbeealchemy.com, Diane Razmataz, Tracy King, Andrew Watson, Amy Taylor, Christine Rath-Selhe, Mindy Kentop, Hope Battaglia, Cass and Bailey, Melissa Armour, Janet Shaw-Binns, Bruce Williams, and Christopher Kohler. And I currently have 4 awesome listeners who support this show at the $10 level. And as you know, that $10 level isn't even a thing. Those awesome paranerds are Glenna Becker, Steve Skinner, James Wilfong, and Peggy Hagan. And then there's the completely made up $20 level. And who are they? Norman and Linda Keller and Kevin Gilbert. Thank you, paranerds.